It is time for the final episode of this series on entrepreneurial leadership. We are privileged to meet up with Risto Siilasmaa, the chairman of the board of Nokia, a true and thoughtful entrepreneurial leader, who has shared his first-hand views on this very topic in his book, The Paranoid Optimist. Fundamental topics are discussed on responsibility, long-term view, trust, and leading by example. What a beautiful ending of this series. Enjoy.
Ever since starting on this journey on discovering entrepreneurial leadership, we've been searching for the essence. In your book, which is a brilliant book, by the way, thank you for that, you present something called 10 elements of entrepreneurial leadership. And the very first of your elements is sense of responsibility. Could you tell us a little bit, what does responsibility mean for you?
Well, it basically starts from a sense of ownership. And that's a difficult word to use because people start thinking about equity, shares, percentages, but I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the feeling of accountability, the feeling of responsibility. And when you're an entrepreneur and you start a new company and you start hiring people, of course you feel a sense of responsibility towards everything that the company does. You want it to be ethical, you want it to be admired, you want to do things in a long-term way. And you want to create an environment where the people that you hire will do well. They will enjoy their work and they will grow as human beings. And that's sort of a given to an entrepreneur, to a founder, that sense of responsibility. But of course you can have that sense of responsibility regardless of your role. I often have used perhaps a little lame example about rental cars. And I ask people that, okay, you have rented cars, yes. How many of you have washed your rental car? And very, very few people have ever washed a rental car. But of course they wash their own car because they have a sense of ownership for that car. And that sort of builds a contrast between a car that is somebody else's and I'm just using it and something that you own. And I'm trying to tell people that if you feel that your job is like a rental car, then you need to do something about it because you deserve better. You deserve to find a job that feels like your own car, or at least a co-owned car. We all own it together. This is ours. Because then you have a sense of accountability and responsibility, not just about your own perhaps narrow role, but about everything that the company does. When you see there being a problem somewhere, you think, can I do something about that? Not just that whose job is it to fix that and that person hasn't done their job, but rather what can I do about it? And that's why I think the accountability and responsibility and sense of ownership are such central dimensions of entrepreneurial leadership.
Great. Building on your metaphor, how important do you think is the driver of the car? Car is one thing. You have the driver of the car, taking care of the driver, people in the back seat of your car. A little bit like our planet can be the car, but who are the people inside? How will we take care of ourselves and the co-passengers?
Well, I think another feature of an entrepreneur, at least for most entrepreneurs, is taking the long-term view. So in my book, somebody who starts a company and the only objective is to sell it in 3 years is not a full entrepreneur. In my book, somebody who thinks about the company doing well after 30 years, in whatever form it might have after 30 years, but being fondly remembered by everybody who has worked in the company or with the company after 30 years, then you're really thinking about the long-term success. And that applies to the planet and maybe also to this not as grand metaphor of the car. That we think about, okay, what's the utility of the car, how do we make the passengers get where they want to get, and we do it safely and we do it efficiently and with the minimum harm to the environment.
Beautiful. So the human comes into the center of the equation once again.
The humans should be always in the center of the equation, because life and business is all about people. Business doesn't exist without people. And that's why business can be so much fun.
To be with other people, discover things together, be actually on an adventure maybe together to explore the unknown.
And find ways for 1 + 1 to be at least 3.
Beautiful. Coming back to responsibility, in simplicity you could say there's two things that you can be responsible of: yourself and others in the long term. Your responsibility of Risto, of yourself, would you say that you are right now at the peak of your creativity? If so, why or why not?
Well, that's a good question. It's of course really hard to measure creativity. I do believe that I can sort of connect the dots quite often in ways that are not immediately obvious. And I enjoy meeting different types of entrepreneurs and companies and learn about their business, and then maybe combine what I hear with something that I have heard from a completely different company 10 years ago and make a proposal that makes them think about things slightly differently. That's really enjoyable. But is that creativity as such? If you say or conclude something that surprises the other one, is that then creativity? And have I been more creative before? I have no idea. I think statistics and science suggest that people are at their most creative when they are under 30. If you think about mathematics, for example, almost all mathematicians do their best work before they turn 30. Most of the Nobel Prize winners, I think they have done their best study or the study that they got the Nobel Prize for when they were under 30. But then of course we learn, perhaps we don't get smarter after that, but we might get wiser, and that will compensate for the sort of lack of pure brain power.
And luckily we have other people with us on the journey, so it's not only a one person, but maybe you can architect a team that have these young people also in part of the team and compensate it with people of all kinds to create that creativity. Chess world master Vladimir Kramnik once said about his mental processes. He thought he had a soup theory of the mind, where you're cooking a soup, and the better ingredients you put into this soup, the better the soup gets. What would you say, what are the ways you find ingredients into your soup? Do you read a lot, or do you interact with other people? How do you get the best ideas and sensitivity to go forward?
Well, obviously through reading, watching videos, meeting people. I have the privilege of meeting quite a lot of people and a lot of really smart people through my roles in various companies, but also as an angel or venture capital investor. But then on top of that, I also pick certain topics that I want to study, and I make a more concerted effort to learn. Machine learning has been one such topic where I have spent quite a lot of time learning programming again and building machine learning models, because I wanted to get much, much deeper into that topic so that I can truly understand as much as is reasonable about that topic without becoming a full-time machine learning programmer. And then now I'm trying to understand quantum computing, and I'm working on the math of quantum computing because I believe that it may be something that I should understand.
I'm quite amazed by your humble attitude towards continuous learning. And somehow it's, embodied in the way you bring it forth. If you would look at the way how you have come to this point, what has led you here? What would be not Napoleon Hill or Dale Carnegie or others' recipes for success? What has been, Risto, your recipe for success?
Well, on one hand, I could say that I have just gone where the current takes me. I haven't really listed objectives other than learning objectives. And then through lucky coincidences, I have been offered opportunities, or the opportunities have presented themselves, and I have taken action myself. I don't necessarily believe in sort of prescripting your life. So it's a hard question. I have, from a young age, tried to build a certain philosophy for life. And initially I got it from these 18th and 19th century teenage boys' books, adventure books. You know, the kind where the young boy hides in a sailing ship in the Liverpool harbor, the ship sails and he's found after 2 days and put to washing the decks. And then he grows there and he sees bad leadership and he sees good leadership, and there's a mutiny and there's pirates, and the boy learns to lead from the front and he becomes the captain and he becomes really respected, and sort of the leading from the front, not asking anybody to do something that you wouldn't be willing to do yourself, doing all the jobs yourself as well to understand what they contain, being polite and honest and always trying to do things so that they could be printed on the front page of the next day's newspaper, but also challenging the status quo. So always trying to think that, are these old ways good? Are they good enough? And having a sort of sense of frustration for sort of play acting, where we pretend that things are good, but in our hearts we know that they are not. You have to have trust within the team with which you work, because without that trust, people hesitate to say what they really think. And if they hesitate, at least your right picture of what is happening will be delayed, if not missing altogether. So creating that platform of trust is, I think, one of the most important things for any leader to strive for.
Beautiful. And to create that through your own team, the platform, how can one extend that to the big team and all together, which is the next big challenge? You know, you can, in one sense, you can judge a tree by its fruits. And we discussed about the entrepreneurial leadership. How would you see today, if you take Nokia, how entrepreneurial is Nokia today? And could it be even more entrepreneurial to your mind?
Well, absolutely, it could be a lot more entrepreneurial. Large companies are very challenging in this respect, and Nokia, especially as it's composed of parts that we have acquired. So we have parts that come from the Finnish Nokia networks, parts that come from Siemens, parts that come from Alcatel, parts that come from Lucent, and we have parts that come from a Japanese company, and we have lots of employees all over the world that have their own backgrounds. So creating a uniform culture in that kind of a company is really, really challenging, and it takes a long time. So while we, I think, do exactly the right things, i.e. we describe what kind of a culture we want to have in very clear, plain language, not sort of language built by by marketing agencies, but language decided by us. And then we try to live accordingly ourselves. And I think those two steps are the first two steps on a journey that will lead you closer to where you want to be. You might never get there, but every step you take in the right direction is a positive improvement.
It's a little bit like writing beautiful code to do it elegantly and get the unnecessary things out of the system. How would you say, for instance, changing a Nokia? This is a challenge for any big company. How to get more of the complexity out of the system? Because bureaucracy has a tendency to get into any big organization unavoidably, and that's almost the antithesis of entrepreneurial behavior. How do you fight bureaucracy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. There are some pragmatic things that you can do, but even no matter what you do, that friction that we call bureaucracy will creep in. And sometimes you just need to restructure, you need to reorganize, you need to delayer, just to sort of clean things up. I haven't found any way to keep that sort of creeping bureaucracy from happening. But some things that you can do, for example, your meeting practices. You can define what is a good meeting. How do we hold meetings in our company? Because, for example, if you have meetings where nothing is decided, then you can always question, was this efficient? It was clearly an information exchange meeting. So could we have exchanged that information in a more efficient way, doing it offline or in a smaller team, and then shared what we learned electronically? If we have a decision-making meeting where we don't have any one person who could make that decision, then that may lead to a lot of meetings where no decisions are being made. Or if we have a meeting where everybody feels they have a veto right, then we may end up not making decisions. What kind of an agenda do we have? Do we think in advance, what do people have to have, sort of knowledge, information, documents, material before the meeting, so that we can have an efficient meeting? Sort of, do we have preconditions for the meeting? And so forth and so forth. In a large company like Nokia, I think we spend 20 million hours every year in meetings. Think about that. If we could improve the efficiency of those meetings by 10%, that would be worth 2 million working hours.
Maybe in one simplicity, one could say that actually there's only 3 things one needs to do better in life. Do something, might be a meeting or coming together or event. What happens before, during, and after? So that this before, during, and after even applies to your day. How do you look into next day? How do you reflect on this day and how you go forward?
And that's a good example of sort of using different dimensions to improve something. Thinking about meetings from the point of view of before, during, and after. That's one point of view. And it's a very useful point of view, because then you can think about, okay, what should we do better before? How should we run the meeting during? And what's necessary for us to be successful after? But then there are other points of view, like who are invited into the meeting? How do we have certain sort of meeting practices? Like in the Nokia board, we have golden rules for our board work. So we have discussed how we want to conduct ourselves in the meeting. And that's a very different thing than before, during, and after. So observing important things from different points of view always gives you a new perspective, and you learn something new, and you come up with new ideas.
we are not alone here. And like you started in the beginning of describing a company, it's all about the people. And to be a leader of a big organization like you are, and any organization actually, crucial is to identify right people, the right places at the right time. How have you developed? How do you spot talent? And have you gotten better at it maybe? Or do you have your own ways of seeing whom to engage as ingredients in the soups that you are cooking?
I have probably gotten more picky, sort of stricter. And that should not happen at the expense of believing that people can change and improve. But I have also learned that there are not that many really great sort of business people or that many really great programmers. And I also have learned that, at least for myself, it's very important that the value base of these people is strong. So even if one would be really great in a discipline, but if the value base would be weak, I don't want to work with that person. It doesn't bring joy into my life. And I sincerely believe that on average, it also reflects on the business success. And I struggle with some of these great, mostly US-based technology company leaders who have a very abrasive leadership style, like Steve Jobs, who achieved amazing results. But I wouldn't have wanted to work with him. I don't respect certain things that happened according to his biography. I don't respect that.
So it's not only about the results, but how you come to the results and at what costs.
And I sort of have to believe that if you lead people well, and well, I mean, people don't have to be afraid. That's a very fundamental thing. And I have to believe that if people don't have to be afraid, on average, that company will do better than a company where people are afraid. And I struggle with some of these large technology giants where we know that people are afraid.
And beautiful that you bring this back to the core notion of beliefs. From who we are, what we believe, which affects our behavior and maybe what we become. Could you, Risto, still try to get back into the topic of what would you say are your core beliefs with regards to business?
Well, I believe that business really is a multi-stakeholder game where you, and this is, I know that some business leaders disagree with me, but it's not about maximizing the shareholder value. I think it's that, but within certain boundaries where other stakeholders need to feel they get value out of this as well. And I also believe that when some of these other stakeholders are doing well, that increases the likelihood of maximizing shareholder value. But it is a challenging topic to find the global maximum in this. And you have to take several different points of view into account. And today, increasingly to the world, to Mother Earth, and especially to the next generations. With a company such as Nokia, which is 150 plus years old, we all are just gone in a blink of an eye, and the company continues. And we are just caretakers before we turn it over to the next generation. And I think that's easy to understand with an older company. But when you start a new company, how do you think about the long term? Or do you just think about an exit and cashing out? Or do you think about building people, building a legacy, building something permanent? And then how do we make sure that this world remains livable? If that goes, then nothing has any value anymore. It's a very fundamental thing. And how do we incentivize businesses to also think about those kinds of topics and values? Because if we don't find those incentives, and if we don't find that agreement, then the world is at risk.
What would be your thoughts or recommendations to the next generation? The people of the age of 20, 25, now trying to make out in their lives.
Be courageous, think long term, take responsibility, build great teams around you. When you find somebody who is a really great person, work very hard to keep that person close to you. Don't think that the world is full of great people. The world is not full of great people, at least from your point of view. So when you meet somebody who you feel is really great, don't let that person go. And let's work all together to save this world. Because we are in a crisis. And we need to have that sense of urgency. And we may need to give up something that we hold dear in order for the world to be saved. So to have that sense of duty that I'm willing to sacrifice something in order for us to solve our shared problems. And then be ready to lead by example.